Hi everybody, my name is Bahush and Nazdar from Chicago. Nazdar also means hi in Czech, and our Czech friends over at Filmatura asked me to make this video to show you how to build your M-Lite REVO cinema camera conversion kit. You start with one of these really modest Canon EOS-M cameras, and together with Magic Lantern software and the REVO kit, you're going to be able to DIY build your own RAW shooting camera. I've got more to say, but I'm sure you want to see what comes in the little REVO box when you order one. So let's do a quick unboxing. Okay, let's see what comes in the M-Lite REVO box. So you can see it's a very compact, efficient little package, and check it out. Environmentally responsible cardboard packaging, custom made, and there's the REVO. This is the front where the lens mount will go. Let's pop this front off. And you'll see this carrier tray, and inside is this metal card, and we slide that down, and oh, check it out, gummy bears. This is for you to munch on while you do the build, you know, keep the dopamine going. And then inside are cables and buttons and screws and the dummy battery and some of the specialty tools you'll need as well. So let's pop this back in like so. Now you can see the fan that keeps the camera cool while you're pushing things with those raw high resolution modes. We'll give you a first look at these attachment points, built to be super sturdy. And on the back, we've got the power management system. What this lets you do is just plug in one Sony NPF style battery, and that'll operate the camera, the fan. It'll give you a 12-volt output for an accessory, plus you can charge the battery with a USB input. And on the back, you still get full-size HDMI and a microphone input. But the nice thing is that one battery runs everything. Plus, this is a great time to talk about how modular REVO is. This whole back can come off, and here's like one of the other modules. Now, it looks the same, but it's also got a D-tap output. This backplate is a REVO exclusive, and it's one of many new custom accessories from Filmatura, most of which are compatible with both M-Lite and M-Lite REVO. You know, just keep an eye on the website or the mailing list to stay up on which modules are available. Here's the side that shows you where the original buttons from the camera are going to go. And of course on top, that's where your screen is going to go. More attachment points and the REVO logo etched in metal. Pretty swanky. And the bottom, of course, you've got your tripod mounts, and this is where the dummy battery goes and where you can take the memory card in and out. So as you can see, very compact, lots going on in a small package. But it would be even more exciting if we started building the camera. So let's go do that. I hope you're excited to start building your REVO camera, because build time is now. The REVO, as you saw, comes with all the specialty tools you'll need, but you'll need a few more things, including a set of precision Phillips screwdrivers, like the kind that jewelers use. I got this set, I think it was like 15 bucks. It's a bunch of these tips and a handle. A lot of these tips are for getting into stuff you're really not supposed to get into. But we're just here for those Phillips, those fine head screwdriver tips. And then we're also maybe going to use these plastic pry tools, the kind of things that they use when they like open up a cell phone. But like I said, this was like a $15 kit. It's really handy to have at home. So anything you can find that's close to this is great. And then of course you need the camera itself. I recommend that you install Magic Lantern ahead of time, make sure it's all working. That's going to make life easier down the road. And then we'll get started on the project, which is kind of in two phases, right? Phase one is taking the camera apart. And then phase two is taking all those parts and putting them into the REVO camera body. And really what we're doing is kind of easy to visualize, because we're taking the camera back off, then we take the screen and put it on top of the REVO. We take the buttons, put it on the side of the REVO. Then we put the camera back on, which is nice that you don't lose it, and you can reverse this mod anytime you want. And these openings that are left behind are so that the fan can cool the components that are getting pushed every time you shoot in RAW, in those high resolution modes, which is one of the main benefits of the REVO. You have this cooling system in there. So, you're ready? Make sure you take your time. Force is not your friend. Adrenaline is not going to get you out of any bad situations here. Don't be afraid to rewind a little bit if you want clarity on a step. If you need extra help, you can always go to the Facebook group, or you can contact Filmatura themselves at filmatura.com. And, have your gummy bears nearby, because, maybe you're going to munch on a couple while you're doing the build. Like I said, keep that dopamine going. But, all right, I think it's time to get started. You ready? Let's go. Okay, here's the patient, the Canon EOS-M camera, the heart and soul of the REVO project. Now, before we get started, let's get our supplies together. Got my screwdriver with the 000 tip installed. You'll notice I put a cork sheet down to act as my work surface so I don't scratch anything. You might want a little dish for the little screws to go into. My screwdriver kit came with this magnetic sheet I can just put the screws onto, so that's kind of nice. And then, of course, just in case, the Haribo gummy bears. But we'll keep that off to the side to not get distracted yet. Okay, first, take out the battery and the memory card. Put those to the side. And we're going to start with the side with the ports, right? There's the little door that opens up, and that's where your HDMI port, etc. are. So there are 3 screws on this side. There's a bottom screw, a top screw, and then there's one right there in the middle. So we'll remove these with a screwdriver. Push firmly so you don't strip the screws. There's my first one. It goes off camera onto the little magnetic sheet. And I'll go to the one that's kind of hidden by the door. And then finally, the topmost one. Now the screws are different sizes, so make sure to keep track of that. Now we can pop the whole side panel off. I'm going to use one of these guitar pick looking things that came with my toolkit. You could use a flathead screwdriver, but I'm always reluctant to do that with like plasticky parts. With just a little persuasion, it came off. Set that to the side. Now we flip to the other side of the camera, and you can see these 2 screws right here. We're going to remove them both. And this panel came right off. Set that to the side. And now don't start tearing the camera apart yet, but you can see that it's loose now. The front and the back are loose from each other. Now let's move to the bottom of the camera, and you'll see that there are 4 screws surrounding the tripod quarter 20. So you only need to remove the 2 that are on the same side as the screen, so toward the rear of the camera. So let's remove those. Like so. Okay, now we move to the rear of the camera, and I'm being careful to kind of hold it closed, right, so that the back doesn't flop off. Because behind these buttons, there's a ribbon cable, and that can be kind of fragile, so you don't want to like tear this off. This is a careful part of the operation. First, we need to pry off this little rubber thumb grip. This might take a little doing because it's on there with some glue or something like that. I'm using my little guitar pick pry gimmick. Yeah, it seems to be on there with some double-sided tape. Didn't have a chance against my guitar pick. And see, there's one more screw in there. So I want to loosen that up and remove it. And again, this is where the fragile part of the operation happens. You don't want to tear the ribbon cable that's behind the buttons. So we just start prying the 2 halves apart. Again, I'm using my little guitar pick thing. I'm kind of working my way around the camera. because, you know, even though it's not sealed, it's been together for a long time. There we go. That was a good sound. There we are, very gently. I was a little stubborn over there, but here we go. See, there's that ribbon cable. That's the whole enchilada right there, so don't mess with that. Be very, very careful when you're prying apart the two parts of the camera. Now we need to free the ribbon from the motherboard, and again, be very careful not to stretch it or tear it. It's tucked under this little gray piece of plastic, and then there's a brown piece of plastic that's almost like a light switch. So here's a close-up of where that ribbon cable connects into the motherboard of the camera. I'm using this plastic tool, because if I use my fingers, you wouldn't be able to see anything. But what you need to do is to flick this little light tan piece to release the hold on the connector. You do not want to use a big tool for this. Your fingernail is probably ideal, but you don't want to use like a screwdriver or, heaven forbid, an X-Acto knife or something like that, because it's a very little piece. It doesn't need to move very much. In fact, here, I'll just do it right now. See how it sort of hinges forward? And now we're able to remove that cable with no force. The little flippy thing I'm referencing is this one right here. It just flipped down like a little light switch. Okay, start breathing again. Now what we need to do is, there's a single screw that's holding the buttons to this rear frame. So let's take that single screw out. Now don't pull on the ribbon cable to get these buttons out. And there's the button assembly. Now it's time to remove the screen, and along with it these two ribbon cables that are fragile, so you need to remove them very carefully. Let's take a look at a different view. This is the small ribbon cable, this is the big ribbon cable, and what we're interested in is these black pieces of plastic that are clamping the ribbon cables in. So I'm going to use this plastic tool to kind of flip the switch open to loosen up the grip on the ribbon cable. I would not use anything metal or pliers or anything like that, because these components are delicate, plus you don't want to rip the ribbon cable. And I'm using this plastic tool because if I used my fingers, you wouldn't be able to see what I'm doing. But like maybe flicking it with a fingernail would be like the best, most safe thing to do. Okay, that's one. That's the other. So I flipped them up like kind of like a light switch. Okay, now it's time to remove the screen. You're going to want to move it this direction away from the ribbon cables. And so I use my little pry tool to kind of get the screen out from where it's seated. Don't pry away at the layers of material that make up the screen. It's got this metal frame underneath. And I'm just gently sliding it away, like so. And there you go. Got the screen free now. Okay, next step is to remove the battery door. That's down here at the bottom. When you fly it open, you've got two screws that we'll remove. And there are a couple parts to this. There's this metal inner part. Come on, fella. And then there's the outer plastic door. That comes right off. And now all we need is this part to remain. Here's what your camera should look like now. As we look at the back is exposed. The port side has all the jacks exposed. The other side is just kind of there. And on the bottom, you've got the frame left from the battery door and also where the SD cards come in. Okay, you did it. Now you're ready for the next phase. Okay, troops, time to build the REVO. And so we're going to need to get out that carrier tray because we need the little Allen key, except it's not an Allen key at the end, it's a Torx wrench. It's the one that looks like a little star at the end. Because we're going to remove this side panel. You can use either end. I'm helping by pushing the panel out from beneath. And now we've got these extensions that are for the audio and the HDMI. Now let's move to the top, and we want to remove the frame for the screen. And then this is where the control buttons will go. Here's where the buttons from the rear of the camera are going to go. Remove that plate. And again, I'm just leaving the screws in as I move it to the side. I grabbed this stuff out of the carrier tray because it's time to use this cable. We've got gold contacts on one side, and then we've got a white line on the other. You want the gold contacts to be facing down, facing the motherboard of the camera. And the white line will help us make sure that the cable is fully seated in the connector before we clamp shut that little black switch. So let's go just slide it in. And then flip the switch. And the white line is perfectly aligned, meaning that it's making good contact. In the past, we noticed with the M-Lite, a lot of times when people had problems with their screen, it was because that cable wasn't seated right. So you want to make sure to get that correct. And again, be very gentle when you're flipping that little black plastic clamp. You don't want to force it, but it takes a little bit of finessing to get it to work. We also need to attach this little circuit board, and it has the same sort of clamping thing on it. Got to make sure it's open by flipping it upwards. And now we insert this cable into the edge connector. That one goes in there pretty smoothly. And then close the little clamping switch thing down. And again, I want to emphasize that that alignment line is perfect. Now we're going to install the rear button extension ribbon cable. And it plugs in right where we unplugged the rear buttons of the camera. So it's this teeny tiny little socket, and it's got that little flip switch thing that will bite down on the end of the cable. It's just difficult to get it in there. I've got this pair of tweezers here to help me out. I wish I had plastic tip tweezers, but if I'm careful, I can make this work. And remember, you want the gold contacts to face down, face toward the motherboard of the camera. So I'm going to guide this into the socket using my tweezers. Oops. There we are. And now we flip that little retaining switch thing. There. And now that's biting down on the end of that cable. And as you see, it's secure in there. Now we're going to grab the rear of the camera. And let's thread the LCD cable through the big hole where the screen was. And this extension cable will go right here where the dial originally was. And if we're... and now we can snap the two halves of the camera back together. We're not going to use screws yet, but we just want to put it back together temporarily because we're about to test the camera out in just a couple steps, and the camera has to be reassembled in order to work. Now that you've got the camera reassembled, click on the on-off switch a few times just to make sure that everything's lined up again now that you've got the body reassembled. Mine's fine. And now we're going to install the battery switch defeat, which is this little piece right here. Here's a closer look at the battery switch defeat. By the pointed end, there's a tab that's going to go into a little gap I'll show you in the side of the camera's battery compartment. And then if I turn this, it's hard to see, but there are two little slots that are going to mate up with tabs in the battery compartment, and that'll make everything hold together. Now that little gap, that's where the tab goes on the battery switch defeat. And here are the two little nubs on the back. Those go into the slots on the battery switch defeat to help lock it in. It's harder to explain than it is to do, so let's just get it installed. I'm just lining up with the little gap, sliding that in, and then the whole thing slides just a little bit. Definitely make sure that the battery switch defeat goes in there straight and it's not on an angle, because it could possibly interfere with the SD card slot, and you don't want that. So make sure it's sitting in there nice and straight, parallel to the back of the camera. So we're very close to being able to test the camera out. We just need to temporarily install the buttons, and I'm going to do that last because the fragile ribbon cable still freaks me out. And then we're going to attach the screen and pop in a battery and see how everything powers up. Now let's attach the screen to the extension. First, in this case, we need to flip up the little switch to get it ready. And now we slide that cable in there. And once you've got it where you need it, click that little switch shut. And there we are. And now we're going to do the same thing here. Here's a close-up on the end of the extension cable for the button board. And it has the same kind of connector as we see on the motherboard of the camera. So let's open this up. Again, I'll use my little plastic tool to do it gently. There, I've kind of hinged it open. Okay, now we're ready to hook up the button board to the extension cable. Remember, gold contacts facing down. And I just want to insert it in this little connector. Oh, there we go. Good, good, good. Make sure it's straight. And now I locked it with a little switch, and we're good to go. So now let's pop a battery in the bottom. I'm also going to put in a memory card that has Magic Lantern installed on it, so we can see if we can boot right into Magic Lantern. Okay. Here we go, everybody. Moment of truth. I'm going to hit the power button. And I've got some blinky blinky. What's on the screen? Aha, look at that. And we have booted into Magic Lantern, if you can see past all the fingerprints and the glare. Be really thorough in your testing. Test every button, make sure the screen's okay, because this is the time to make sure that those cables are fully seated and fully plugged in. When people run into a problem with the build, it is frequently because the cables aren't seated correctly. They're seated crooked, or they're not seated all the way in their slots. So make sure that everything works, because after this point, it's going to be enormously painful to try to fix any problems you encounter. Okay, so we did it. That was the tough part. Okay, that's awesome. That earns you a couple gummy bears, right? So I'm going to click the camera off. We're going to uninstall, whoops, I mean it. There we go. We're going to uninstall the screen and the buttons. And now our next step is to move into installing the heart and mind of our Magic Lantern raw shooting monster into the REVO camera body. Before we install the EOS-M camera into the REVO body, make sure to put the dummy battery in. And now we're ready for the next step. I'm going to reinstall the screws back into the camera body to just keep it nice and secure, and we don't lose the screws. And again, in case we ever want to undo this mod, then all the screws are already right there. We don't have to go looking for them. But I'm going to reinstall the screws, and then we're going to go into the next phase, which is to install in the REVO camera body. Okay, I hope you're excited because we've reached the phase where we're going to be taking the Canon EOS-M and putting it into the REVO camera body. Now, if you look at the front there, you can see the fan. You can see these kind of ports where cables are going to go. The camera is going to eventually mount like that, right? And you can see where there's this port on the side, and this is where those ribbon cable extensions are going to go. You're going to route the LCD one out the top of the REVO, and then the side button one, peekaboo, comes out the side like that. Before we do that, though, we're going to choose our power button. You get red and black in the kit. I'm going to go stealth and just stick with black. And notice there's a little guide on the one side. It looks like a beak a little bit. And look at the hole in the top of the REVO. That is that's where this button goes, and there's a little notch, right? And that's so that it lines up and does not rotate. There you go. I'm going to hold it in place. And now there it is on top, and make sure you get some nice movement out of it, because this is going to hit the on-off button of the EOS-M inside. So you want to make sure that that's free to move. Okay, so keep in mind that this is still loose until we install the camera, so be careful with that. And now we install the camera. Again, be careful with the ribbon cables. I can't stress that enough. And then guide them to where they need to go. So I'm routing the side button one out the side. Oops. Like so. And then the LCD one is coming out the top. In order to get the camera to seat in here, tilt it so the Canon logo is kind of tilted inside the camera body, and make sure you're not creasing these cables. As you tilt the camera into place, make sure to press in the little metal door and hold it while you settle the camera in. There's a little spot that'll kind of hold it shut for you once it's inside the body. And now would be a good time to plug in the lead from the power management system. Just plug it in the bottom through that metal door. Here's the view from the bottom showing the power cord plugged into the dummy battery going through the remnants of that metal door on the bottom of the camera. And I just wanted to point out that there's a slot along the side and the back of the battery compartment where you can tuck in any extra cord you might have for a nice, neat install. And there's a little hole in the side that accommodates the strap lug on the side of the camera. So align it like that, and then just place it. And that's it. You're in there. Again, make sure nothing's creasing these cables. And your power button's still there, right? Great. Now the camera's still loose, so we're going to secure it using a 1/4-20 on the bottom. If you go to the carrier tray, there's a 1/4-20 socket cap screw right here on the side, and you can just use this included little T-bar to get it out. There we are. And now gently turn the whole assembly over and drop the socket cap screw in here and just guide it to where the camera is. Got a good bite. And now it's secure in there. And again, test the button out to make sure it's going. Oh, it's starting to shape up, isn't it? Let's go to the side panel and get these buttons taken care of. So I'm going to grab our little button assembly. And here again, we install it just like we did when we tested it. Gold contacts facing down. Will I be lucky again? It'd be so nice to not have to use the tweezers. Oh, it's going. There we are. Flip the little switch there. Give it a little tug. A gentle, gentle tug. Okay, good. We've got it secured. And I'm just going to tuck the excess back into the camera body. And you'll see there's even like a little notch thoughtfully left here so that you're not smashing down on any of these cables. Just sort of coax it into place. Make sure you're not introducing any creases or anything like that. And now we take the side plate and install it. Once you've got the side panel installed, test all the buttons and make sure that they're still clicking well. When you tighten up the 2 screws on that side panel, make sure not to over-tighten, right? You're not sealing it forever. Just snug, because you don't want to like pinch anything that's in there. You don't want to affect the function of the buttons, and you definitely don't want to crush any of the fragile stuff inside. And if you want to reference that strap lug I mentioned before, it should be centered in this hole. And that'll tell you that alignment is A-OK. Okay, now let's move to the side. And you can see where we install the HDMI extension. And again, tuck any excess into that little vent right there. I'm popping that in first. Like so. And then we've got the microphone cable extension. Plug that one in, like that. There's a little groove for the cable. And now we're going to put this panel back on, and make sure to observe that there's a little cutout for the 3.5 cable and the HDMI cable. Let's pop on the front. That's an easy one. Just put that in place. And then we've got these screws that were inside the carrier tray. So let's install the LCD screen. We need to plug the ribbon cable back into this little extension, just like before when we tested it. There we go, good. Now if you look at the frame, you can see where there are little notches cut out that match up with these little metal tabs. So make sure to match those together, like so. Tucking the excess back into the REVO body. Oop. Like so. And now we use the Torx driver to secure the frame. When you tighten the 4 frame screws, you don't have to go super tight, like don't crank on it. Just snug is fine. Because don't forget, with liquid crystal displays, they can be fragile. So if you pinch the wrong thing, you could permanently damage the screen. So just be careful as you seat everything. It's a very precise fit. You'll see there's a little spot for everything to fit into. Gently test fit, and then once you know everything's good, snug those screws down. Here it is, everybody. Take a bow at your DIY build of your M-Lite REVO. Compact, pro, modular, ready to rig, ready to run and gun and shoot your next raw video masterpiece. Let's put a battery on the back. Got your little fuel gauge there telling you that you're powered up. And let's hit the power button. And look what you got. Magic lantern ready to go. I certainly think congratulations are in order, so well done. You built your own REVO, your own cine camera made with your own two hands. It's a remarkable little camera, and I think it's just a glimpse of the future, because I think filmmakers are going to collaborate to create more equipment that they want, more platforms, and hopefully more films. Now, don't forget to share your REVO builds and your REVO projects on the Filmature Facebook group so we can all keep up with what everybody's up to. And I know you want to get shooting, so I'm going to cut this short. But let me ask you one last thing. Were you able to save your little Haribo pack so you could celebrate here at the end? Or did you munch it up along the way? I don't want to say what I did, but you know what? Some of us have made other arrangements. My name is Bohush. Thanks for watching.